This is a video about graphing, specifically graphing numbers and ordered pairs. The first thing you need to know is that to graph means to draw a picture. So when you have to graph a number, that means you need to draw a picture of that number. So I have a bunch of single numbers drawn on the screen here. When you draw a picture of a single number, you use a number line, like what I have at the bottom of the screen. Number lines usually have 0 in the middle, and then they have other numbers marked off at even increments on either side, positives to the right, negatives to the left. On my number line, my increments are all by 1, but on other number lines you might have smaller increments like a half, or bigger ones like 10. To use a vocab word that we've talked about before, all of the numbers marked on my number line are integers, positive or negative whole numbers. So a few of the numbers that I want to graph are integers, 0, 3, -1. To graph those, I simply draw a circle or point or dot at the places where those numbers are on the number line. So to graph -1, I draw a point right here, a nice dark circle. To graph 0, I draw a nice dark circle at 0. To graph 3, I draw a nice dark circle at 3. Graphing fractions and decimals, the other numbers that I have on here, is a little less straightforward. For decimals, like 1.5, -1.1, and -4.5, you want to estimate based on the integer marks on the number line. So 1.5 is halfway between 1 and 2, so I would draw a point right here for 1.5, and I'm going to label that so I can remember what it is. For -1.1, I would go just past -1 in the negative direction, so a little bit closer to 2. That's -1.1. And for -4.5, that's going to be halfway between -4 and -5. So I'm estimating and labeling so I can remember what I was doing. Finally, when you graph fractions, you might find it helpful to think of what their decimal equivalent is. So 1/2 is the same thing as 0.5, so that means that's going to be right between 0 and 1. So I'll draw a point right here and label it 1/2. -2/3 is about 0.6 repeating. That should be negative. So that means that that needs to be on the negative side between 0 and 1, closer to 1 than it is to 0, a little past the halfway mark, so about right there. That's -2/3. So in a nutshell, when I say graph a number, that means draw a dot corresponding to that number on a number line. The other thing that we're going to graph are ordered pairs. So I have a list of 6 ordered pairs here, and they each have a capital letter name. Ordered pairs differ from the numbers we were just graphing because they have 2 parts. They have an x coordinate, the first number, and a y coordinate, the second number. For that reason, you can't graph them on a number line like this one, which has just one direction. You need to graph them on a coordinate plane, which has 2 directions, a horizontal x direction and a vertical y direction. So to graph an ordered pair like A, which is 1, 3, you always go first to the x coordinate, so I'm going over on the x-axis to 1, and then vertically to the y coordinate, which is 3, and I will draw a point right here. Your point is at the intersection of the 1 on the horizontal axis and the 3 on the vertical axis. And you could label this 2 ways. You could either label it just A, or you could also label it 1, 3 to make sure we know which one we're talking about. If we go to B, that's -2/4. We have to go to -2 on the x, and then up to 4 on the y. For C, we go over 4 in the x direction, and then down to -5 in the y direction. For D, we go to -1 on the x coordinate, and then we go down to -7 on the y. The coordinates of E are 0, 0, so we don't go over at all and we don't go up. So we're right here. 0, 0 is a special point called the origin, because that's where we start in both the x direction and the y. And finally, we have F, 0, -5. So we start at the origin, we don't go over anything in the x direction, and we just go down to -5 on the y-axis. If you haven't heard these 2 words before, each one of these number lines, the horizontal and vertical ones, are called axes. So the horizontal one is called the x-axis. That's where you graph the x coordinates or the first coordinates. The vertical one is called the y-axis. That's where you graph the second, or y, coordinate. And that's graphing, numbers in ordered pairs.